Mill consistently invites her husband's ex-girlfriend to every family gathering, seemingly to demonstrate that her husband made the wrong choice in marrying Mill. This situation escalated when, during Mill's birthday celebration, her husband, Sean, reached his limit with the ongoing presence of Diane and decided to ban her from their lives altogether. To provide some background, Mill, a 28-year-old woman, has been married to Sean, who is also 28, for 2 years. Their romantic journey began after dating for 2 years, having known each other since high school. Although their relationship did not start until a couple of years after finishing college, they unexpectedly reconnected at a restaurant. Their chemistry was instant, leading them to exchange numbers and go on a few dates, bringing them to this point nearly 4 years later. Before Mill entered the picture, Sean was in a long-term relationship with Diane, who was in a lower grade in school. They had been together since middle school, creating a history that made their breakup significant. While Mill and Sean were not particularly close during high school, they shared many mutual friends, which meant Mill often saw Sean and Diane together. After high school, Sean attended college out of state, and they lost contact for a while. When they finally met again at that restaurant, Mill asked Sean about Diane. He revealed they had ended their relationship a year and a half earlier, with Diane initiating the breakup. Diane had expressed a desire to explore life independently, indicating she wanted to date other people while keeping Sean as an option. Following their breakup, Sean remained friendly with Diane, but kept their interactions minimal. By the time he met Mill, Sean had mostly moved on from Diane. Mill noticed a significant change in Sean since high school. He had matured and was different from the young man she had known before. Their friendship blossomed quickly, characterized by a relaxed and enjoyable dynamic, something Sean admitted was missing in his relationship with Diane. She often played games, making Sean chase after her, believing it added to her appeal. She would flirt with other men, go out with friends, and neglect to communicate with Sean for days, disregarding his feelings. Sean had stayed with Diane longer than he should have, primarily due to his youth and a misguided belief that he had to make their relationship work because of their long history. Another factor influencing Sean's attachment to Diane was his mother, Sharon. She had a strong affinity for Diane and had developed a close friendship with her. Sharon and Diane would gossip about other family members, which often made Sean uncomfortable. Diane's conventional beauty only added to Sharon's admiration for her, which is perplexing to Mill, but is simply a reality of the situation. Even after Sean broke up with Diane, Sharon insisted on inviting her to family gatherings and holiday dinners. Sean attempted to explain his discomfort to his mother, urging her to stop inviting an ex that he had moved on from, but Sharon simply dismissed his concerns, insisting that she and Diane were still friends. Despite the awkwardness it created, this dynamic persisted even after Sean introduced Mill to his family. The first time Mill met Sean's family was at Christmas 4 years ago, several months into their relationship. Diane was also there, and her behavior towards Mill was hostile. Throughout the event, Diane made snide remarks about Mill's appearance, including her looks, height, outfit, and makeup. Diane cleverly presented these comments as jokes, masking her meanness and humor, which made the situation difficult for Mill. It seemed like she was only joking, but Sean was aware of her true intentions. He attempted to defend me when Sharon interrupted, diving in to directly ask me if I had an issue with Diane's jokes. This put me in a tough spot. I understood that if I admitted I was upset, they would twist it into me being insecure, which would only make things worse. So, I decided to act tough instead and simply said that I didn't care. Although it felt a bit childish, the moment I spoke, I noticed the surprised and irritated expressions on their faces. This reaction gave me a sense of assurance that I had made the right choice. After we returned home, Sean expressed his regret about how Sharon and Diane had treated me. He assured me that he would ensure his mother would not invite Diane again. However, I stopped him, knowing well the type of women they were. I didn't want to allow them to think they had gotten the better of me or that they could intimidate me into feeling insecure. I felt the need to show them my strength, so I explained this to Sean. He was taken aback by my viewpoint, but respected my decision, refraining from interfering further. Since that day, every family gathering hosted by Sharon has included Diane. Each time, their behavior remains unchanged, filled with snide comments, backhanded compliments, and repeated mentions of Diane's past with Sean, even when it was completely unnecessary. I have faced these situations with a brave face, determined to remain unfazed. Sharon has made several comments about how Diane would have been the preferred daughter-in-law and a better match for Sean. While this was frustrating, I stayed strong. As long as Sean stood by my side, their words didn't truly matter. I have been enduring this dynamic for the past 4 years and plan to continue with the same mindset for the next 4 as well. I was not going to be the one to lose my cool. Now, regarding the incident that led me to this reflection, 3 days ago, Sharon celebrated her 49th birthday, which she does every year with all her family and friends. Sean initially didn't want to attend and expressed a desire to go to his coworker's engagement party happening on the same day. Given that his coworker would only have one engagement celebration, and considering their close friendship, Sean's reasons were understandable. Yet, Sharon insisted he promised to attend her birthday party, eventually wearing him down after a few days. So, we agreed to go to her party, planning to leave after she cut the cake to make it to the engagement celebration. At around 5:30 in the evening, my father-in-law brought out the cakes, and we were surprised to see 2 of them. One cake had "Happy Almost Anniversary" written on it, but the significance of the second cake was unclear to anyone present. Instead of Sharon clarifying, it was Diane who jumped in. To our shock, she grabbed Sean by the arm and pulled him to her side, placing him in the spotlight in front of everyone. Diane then began to speak, revealing that almost 10 years ago, on Sharon's birthday, Sean had proposed to her with a promise ring. They had both been just 18 at the time, about to head to different colleges. Now, a decade later, she was still wearing that ring and proudly showed it off to everyone. The moment escalated when she gave Sean an awkward hug that he didn't reciprocate, while Sharon cheered them on, claiming she willingly allowed them to steal her time. She let them take the spotlight without a fight, so they could enjoy what might have been their big moment. The entire situation was so absurd that Sean and I just stood there in disbelief, our mouths hanging open like all the other guests around us. For a few minutes, nobody spoke because we were all stunned, unable to find the right words to respond to something so outrageous. Diane continued to chatter away, humorously declaring Sean to be her almost husband and Sharon her almost mother-in-law, insisting that this was their almost anniversary, as if we were all oblivious to the humor in it. Sharon then proceeded to cut the so-called anniversary cake, first offering a piece to Diane, and then turning to feed it to Sean. When she approached him with the cake, he seemed to snap back to reality and pulled away from her, clearly uncomfortable. Sharon was taken aback by his reaction and asked him what was wrong. The moment she uttered that question, chaos erupted. Sean exploded with anger, unleashing years of pent-up frustration against both her and Diane. He launched into a tirade, calling them shallow, foolish, and so self-centered that they had become delusional. He expressed his shame at having been involved with Diane, and the fact that he was actually related to Sharon, branding them as the most disgraceful women he had ever encountered. I was honestly shocked by this outburst since Sean was usually calm and collected. It was rare for him to raise his voice, and it took a lot to push him to that limit. Clearly, both Sharon and Diane had crossed a line that day. After he finished venting, Sean stormed out of the party, and I followed suit. We took a cab to a friend's house instead, and along the way, I tried to engage him in conversation about what had just happened. He looked genuinely upset and told me he wasn't ready to discuss his mother and his ex at that moment, so I decided to respect his wishes and let it be. Upon arriving at the party with his friends and coworkers, I noticed his mood had lightened, and I felt relieved to see him smiling again. By the time we returned home, his spirits seemed much improved, and I thought it would be a good time to revisit the earlier incident. However, when I brought it up, he shut me down, and I found myself on the receiving end of a long talk about how much of what had happened could also be blamed on me. He acknowledged that Sharon and Diane had indeed tried to humiliate me with the cake, yet he argued that I wasn't completely innocent myself. He pointed out that I had enabled him to remain silent for years, while allowing Sharon and Diane to act however they wanted at these gatherings. He said I was so focused on proving my indifference that I overlooked his feelings in this dynamic. It was frustrating to hear him say I had made everything about my own need to appear unfazed when I should have been considering how Sean felt. He felt trapped in the middle of our silent battles, suffering while we played our mind games. Although he didn't expect such behavior from Diane and Sharon, he did expect support from me, and he expressed disappointment that I had prioritized my own feelings over his in that hectic moment. When he brought this up, I argued, feeling it was too harsh to pin the blame on me. However, now that I reflect on it more calmly, I can see he made a valid point. I had inadvertently pressured him to stay quiet while his mother invited his ex to family functions, creating a situation that was uncomfortable for both of us. As a resolution, I apologized to Sean later that evening. After reading the feedback from others, doing some self-reflection, and talking to a few friends, I realized he was right. I had been putting my own feelings above his, pretending that Diane and Sharon's actions didn't get to me. I should have considered how those actions affected Sean too. For his sake, I realized that I should at least give him the chance to put an end to this if that's what he wanted. I had made him set aside his own feelings for so many years, just so I could win what turned out to be a twisted mind game with people I didn't even like. In doing this, I put at risk the one relationship that truly matters to me, and I knew I had messed up badly. I understood that I had to make amends for all the pain I caused him. Since the day of the party, Sean had been giving me the cold shoulder, and I was trying hard to act like it didn't bother me. This was a pattern for me, pretending that things didn't affect me, even when they clearly did. I wanted to appear nonchalant and unfazed by anything, so I bottled up my feelings instead of expressing them, which I now see as a really unhealthy coping mechanism. If I wanted my marriage to work, I had to change this habit. Today, I decided to skip work and make things right. I went to get dinner from Sean's favorite place and also picked up a chocolate cake that said, "I'm sorry." When I got home, I set everything up and tried to make it as romantic as I could for him. I know he is a sucker for those heartfelt apologies you see in sappy romantic comedies, and I genuinely felt terrible about everything I had put him through without even knowing it. When he returned home that evening after work, he was completely taken aback by what I had prepared for him. It didn't take long for him to forgive me. Within just 15 minutes of his arrival, we had a teary reconciliation. I ended up crying because I was so afraid of losing him during the time he wasn't speaking to me. We talked things out, and it felt like everything was getting better between us once I acknowledged my mistake. I explained to him my constant need to come across as someone who is cool and laid back. Basically someone who doesn't care about anything for no other reason than it seems stylish. I admitted that I often avoid being vulnerable with people, and he understood where I was coming from. He respected my honesty and appreciated that I wanted to work on these issues instead of hiding my feelings like I usually do. He even apologized for being rude to me, but I assured him he didn't need to do that, as he was only responding to the tension between us. His ability to show kindness during this situation made me realize just how lucky I was to have him in my life. After we finished dinner, we finally discussed what had happened with Diane and Sharon at the party. I hadn't heard from either of them since then, and honestly, the argument with Sean made me forget about them completely. However, I learned that Sharon had been texting Sean nonstop, trying to guilt him into apologizing to Diane, who was apparently inconsolable and devastated over Sean's behavior. I had to resist the urge to roll my eyes while reading those messages. It felt ridiculous to me that Sharon was attempting to manipulate Sean by making him feel terribly guilty about the situation. She was trying to convince him that the cake and the whole anniversary joke were harmless, but I found it hard to believe. Here was a married man, and it seemed like they lacked the common sense to see how disrespectful this whole situation was to me. This all felt like their attempt to humiliate me at the party, and they couldn't just brush off their actions by claiming that it was merely a joke. The nerve of Sharon to suggest that Sean and I had overreacted was laughable. Sean had been ignoring her texts, and after seeing those messages today, we decided together that we were done with her nonsense. We wanted no part in this anymore. An update. Just a few days ago, we blocked both Sharon and Diane on all our social media accounts. Sean also told his dad that he didn't want to speak to his mother anymore. His dad respected Sean's feelings, but made it clear that he wouldn't get involved since he loved his wife too, and wanted to stay out of it just as he had for the past couple of years. For the past few years, I have not been in agreement with the way my father-in-law behaves, but it's something I feel powerless to change. Everything seemed to be going smoothly for a couple of days, until today, when Sean unexpectedly called me. He informed me that he needed to go to the hospital immediately because his mother had fallen down the stairs and broken her leg. His maternal uncle had been the one to give him the news, and both of us rushed to the hospital that his uncle mentioned, arriving around the same time. However, just as we were about to enter the hospital, Sharon confronted us right there in the parking lot. To our surprise, she seemed completely fine. It turned out that she and Diane had planned to block our entry so that they could speak to Sean because, apparently, he had blocked their calls and messages everywhere. My presence there was something they clearly did not expect, but they ignored me and continued to chat with Sean as if nothing was wrong. Diane tried to justify her actions from a recent party by calling it a prank, mentioning that she never meant to upset him. Sharon supported her, insisting that it was all in good fun. Sean listened for a moment, but then firmly told both of them to leave him alone, right in front of their stunned faces, and walked away with me. As we tried to get to our cars, Sharon began yelling at us, but we did not stick around to hear her out. I assumed she was venting her anger and hurling insults at us, but none of that mattered at the moment. It was clear she had manipulated the situation to get to Sean again, which I found to be incredibly underhanded. Sean opted to go home from the hospital because he was feeling overwhelmed, while I had to return to work. While I was at work, I received a surprising call from an unknown number, which turned out to be Sean's mother. She unleashed a stream of loud, angry words at me for what felt like an eternity, but I managed to hang up after a short time. I was caught off guard at work and hadn't planned on answering the phone in the first place. All I could make out were some severely disjointed expletives at maximum volume. I didn't understand why she was directing her anger toward me since I had nothing to do with Sean's feelings or actions. It felt like she was the one pushing him so hard, not me. After that call, I decided to block her number and tried to focus on my work. Later that day, when I got home around 6 o'clock, I had a chance to talk to Sean. He revealed that he had blocked more of his relatives who were close to his mother, including his uncle. It became evident to him that she was willing to go to any extreme to make him forgive them and communicate with them. Right now, we felt that there was not much we could do since they weren't physically threatening or stalking us, which made the idea of a restraining order unnecessary. Sean had also spoken to his father about the incident, but his father refused to take any action. This decision is ultimately his to make, and Sean cares for his dad, so I've kept quiet about it for the moment. However, I do believe that my father-in-law's behavior doesn't set a positive example of fatherhood. At the very least, he should have a conversation with his wife and support his son, but he won't even do that. Sean has always had love for his father, yet the man has never stood up for him in situations involving Sharon. I've held back on sharing my true feelings out of respect for their relationship, but sometimes I wonder how someone as good-hearted as Sean ended up in a family that often seems so self-absorbed. A week has passed since my last update, and just yesterday, we made the decision to pursue a restraining order against Sharon and Diane due to something they attempted to do to me. A few days ago, specifically Thursday, I went back home from work and stopped at my usual coffee shop to treat myself to a frappuccino. As I walked into the shop, I noticed Diane and Sharon had been sitting there, waiting for me. Once they saw me, they immediately stood up and approached me, clearly ready to confront me again. As I stood in the coffee shop, I felt completely unprepared for what was about to happen. Out of nowhere, Diane and Sharon charged right at me with their cups of coffee. Before I could even react or step back, they collided with me, and hot coffee splashed all over my face. The shock was immediate, leaving me stunned and frozen in place. Just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, Diane grabbed some whipped cream from her cup and dumped it onto my hair, making the situation even more outrageous. For a moment, I was completely taken aback. I didn't know how to respond as I stood there, feeling sticky and embarrassed. Thankfully, the baristas noticed the chaos and rushed over to help me. They did their best to clean me up, abandoning their posts to lend a hand, which I truly appreciated. The other customers were also patient, waiting as I tried to wipe the coffee off my clothes. My outfit was now covered in that sticky mess, and my hair was a complete disaster, but I felt a bit cleaner after the baristas helped me. Amid the commotion, some customers checked in on me to see if I was okay. One even asked if I wanted to call the police. After thinking it over, I decided to report Diane and Sharon for their actions. I pressed charges, but sadly, they only received a slap on the wrist, a small fine, since it was classified as a misdemeanor. Although I wasn't physically harmed, the damage to my clothes was real. That brown coffee stain on my shirt meant I couldn't wear it to work again. Despite the outcome, we did press charges, and it will be on their record, which could be helpful in the future. Sean had initially wanted to make this public, sharing it on social media so others would be aware of Diane and her mother. However, he changed his mind after realizing I preferred to move on from the whole mess without dragging it out any further. To be honest, the incident really shook me up. It may sound silly, but it made me realize just how dangerous things could have been. If they had wanted to, they could have hurt me badly, especially since they knew my daily routine and where I lived. With everything that happened, Sean and I began considering a move. We had already been having a decent financial year, and now we felt even more certain that relocating was the right choice. On top of that, we had been talking about starting a family soon. However, after everything that went down, my father-in-law is now completely cut off from our lives. He didn't intervene during the coffee incident, which led to a huge fight between him and Sean, and ultimately, they decided to cut ties for good. I honestly feel relieved knowing I won't have to deal with them anymore.